the adoption curve here is definitely led by executives. And it's so weird to look at because we're used to the younger entry level folks driving that adoption curve. But instead, I think there's one or two things going on here. Like I mentioned, I think people know that this is a very fast growing and still evolving product. But I think one big thing underpinning that discrepancy between entry level and executive adoption is that the executive players in the space, I think they have a business perspective from their years in the industry, having gone through some changes. I think they know what's coming, even if it's not there yet. And so I think entry level folks are using these tools, and there's some useful things, but there's a lot of things that are still not quite ready for prime time. There's some warts and things that aren't really working right in these early products. It's still very early stage. And so it's in beta for a lot of times. But executives, they know that that's just the beginning. And so I think they're eyes on the ball with these new tools coming out.
Welcome to AI and Marketing Unpacked, where we simplify AI for impactful marketing. I'm your host, Mike Alden, here to guide you through the world of artificial intelligence and its transformative impact on marketing strategies. Each episode will break down AI concepts into manageable insights and explore practical applications that can supercharge your marketing efforts. Whether you're an experienced marketer or just starting to explore the potential of AI, this podcast will equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to succeed. So tune in and let's unlock the power of AI together. Greetings, program. Welcome back to AI and Marketing Unpacked, where I selfishly use this time to pick the brains of experts at keeping up with and integrating or layering artificial intelligence into social media, content, advertising, search, and other areas, digital marketing. Oh, and you get to learn too. Subscribe to be shown how to prepare yourself and your brand for this AI revolution and come out ahead. Now, what if everything you thought you knew about technology adoption and marketing was wrong? Imagine a world where C-suite executives are more comfortable with AI than digital natives. Well, according to groundbreaking new research from Lightricks and the American Marketing Association, that world is already here. For decades, we've operated under the assumption that new technology adoption flows from the bottom up. Young professionals fresh out of college bring new tools and techniques to their organizations, but AI is completely flipping this script, creating an unprecedented divide in marketing teams that threatens both innovation and career growth. The numbers are startling. While 77% of executives use AI weekly, only 43% of entry-level marketers do the same. Even more concerning, 65% of executives have received formal AI training compared to just 34% of early career marketers. This isn't just a gap, it's a canyon that's growing wider every day. But today, we're joined by Corbett, a pioneer in the creator economy and AI space. As part of Lightricks, which recently partnered with the American Marketing Association on this groundbreaking research, Corbett brings unique insights into this shifting landscape. His experience leading popular pays through his successful acquisition by Lightricks and his current work developing AI tools for brand safety puts him at the intersection of marketing leadership and technological innovation. Hey, Corbett, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be back. Thanks, Mike.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to have you here and to help us all kind of understand what is going on with AI and these executives and how it's being adopted. And where I want to start is the research showed that this AI adoption of marketing jumped from 73% to 90% in just 1 year. What do you think is driving this dramatic acceleration?
I mean, we all have seen it in our day-to-day lives, but it's really crazy to see the stats of the overall usage in our industries. I think that big jump up to 90%, it's really for two reasons. Number one, I think that when AI tools first came out, they really captivated people's attention. But in the last year, we finally had very practical ways to start using them in our day-to-day workflows. So number one is just they have become useful. But I think there's this increasing focus on AI that is different from other tools we've seen, simply because executives, I think, notice where the trend line is going. And it's also a product that's changing and growing faster than anything else before. And so I think that adoption is basically, we have some real world initial use cases for AI, but then everyone knows more is coming. And so we're paying attention.
And that is really interesting because AI does seem to be different, right? We've talked about how, younger people typically lead those technology adoptions, bringing in new tools, and they're kind of willing to play around and test things. They're willing to be wrong, when I think a lot of executives are not. Why else do you think, though, that AI is so different?
First off, just to state that again, it is really different. I can't think of anything similar in any technological shift. One thing that comes to mind for me is, for example, when I was starting in my career in marketing and advertising over a decade ago, there was, of course, a huge social shift with like Instagram, Twitter, et cetera, being more and more important, Facebook, of course. And it felt like we were always, as entry level teammates back then, trying to push our brands to adopt or push our clients to adopt things, talking about the importance of things. And it felt like the leadership was kind of stuck in ways of working with that they've been used to. But now it's very different. The adoption curve here is definitely led by executives, and it's so weird to look at because we're used to the younger entry level folks driving that adoption curve. But instead, I think there's one or two things going on here. Like I mentioned, I think people know that this is a very fast growing and still evolving product. But I think one big thing underpinning that discrepancy between entry level and executive adoption is that the executive players in the space, I think they have a business perspective from their years in the industry, having gone through some changes. I think they know what's coming, even if it's not there yet. And so I think entry level folks are using these tools, and there's some useful things, but there's a lot of things that are still not quite ready for prime time. There's some warts and things that aren't really working right in these early products. It's still very early stage. And so it's in beta for a lot of times. But executives, they know that that's just the beginning. And so I think they're eyes on the ball with these new tools coming out. So yeah, I think it's a mixture of business experience and the fact that the products aren't really there yet for a lot of the times. And that's what's driving like the executive focus on adoption, even though the entry level teammates aren't using it all the time yet.
I think that observation about experience is spot on. It was something I've been thinking about a lot as well. Generally speaking, executives are older, so they have more experience in business, but they also have a richer understanding of just history and society and where we've gone. And I think they can just feel that AI is different from, say, a brand new social network or a new tool. I mean, they see that there's just so much more depth in this technology. But there was one statistic that I want to drill down to a little bit more, and it goes beyond just the fact that more executives are using AI or understanding it, but they're significantly more comfortable with AI, which really stood out to me. And it was like 55% compared to entry-level marketers, just 33%. What do you think explains that confidence gap?
I think people are using it for different tasks depending on their job. And, entry level teammates are using it for the day-to-day work and finding that it's helpful, but not transformative. And I think that executive teammates are using it for different things. Like I think execs are using it for strategy and collaboration reasons, not just, content creation, et cetera. But I think I'd have to guess it's also just a willingness to lean into it, knowing that it's going to change everything about their work. And so they need to get familiar with it. So there's this discrepancy in confidence as well as training. Executives have a lot more training in this, which is, again, very different from the norm. Usually people pick it up in their personal life, bring these tools to work. And this is completely flips the script here where executives are both teaching themselves and getting formal company training and are more like satisfied in their desire to learn about it. Whereas there's younger entry level folks who aren't getting the training they want, as well as, are left to their own devices to learn about it. So it's a completely different on most aspects of adoption and training versus traditional trends that we've seen in the past.
I think that's just an astute observation, because as I think back to how I used AI initially, how the people in my circles, my social circles, colleagues and friends and so on, they're not entry-level marketers by any stretch, but we're practitioners and technicians. We're the ones creating the blog content, the social posts, and that sort of thing. And so, of course, that's where our first minds went to when it came to using ChatGPT. Oh, it can help me write an Instagram caption. Oh, it can help me write an outline for a blog post, which it can do all those things. But like I've said on the show many, many times, if you don't put a lot of pre-work into it, you're not going to get great output. But if you ask it to sit with you and have a conversation about marketing strategy or business strategy or something like that, it's remarkably good without a lot of pre-work, because it just has that total world knowledge. But one thing you mentioned there was the training. So let's talk about that for a second, because as you mentioned, we're seeing this substantial disparity in training between leadership and staff. What do you think the implications are for marketing folks and career development?
Yep. I mean, there's a few things here. One perspective is we should talk about what companies should do, knowing these stats. And the other is talking to teammates on the ground and talking about how they should be thinking of these things, knowing the stats that we've uncovered through the survey. So, for example, one interesting stat is that for executives, only 13% say that they want more training than they have. But for entry-level folks, it's about 27%. So more than double say that they want more training than they have access to. So that's really important for both stakeholders here. Companies should know that there is a latent desire for training, which that never happens, right? Like no one ever says, I want more training. But everyone knows that this is going to be important for our jobs, and companies should be really receptive to offering formal training here. And it is really important how you use these tools. One thing that I would say is that a lot of times people use AI tools and then they don't work and then they don't try them for a long time. But things are changing so quickly that the same tools are completely different 6 months later. And so I think consistent training is required, and companies should know there's a latent desire for entry-level teammates to get that training. So if they hear anything, they should be responsive to that. On the converse angle, like I think that entry-level teammates should advocate for training if they want it. 41% of entry-level people are self-directed in their training. So that's the vector through which they learn the most. Whereas for executives, 65% are learning from the company's training. So it's really different. We expect entry-level people to be self-directed, but I think, when you see almost half of the teammates getting the company training versus, double the amount on the executive side getting company training, I think that's just something that we should point out. If you want training, advocate for it. And if you're a company, consider offering it.
Either through the report or through your own experience, do you have any indication of what that training should really look like? Is it video training, read a book, listen to podcasts? What should they be looking for?
I would say that there are a few people in each organization that have a lot of expertise here. And one thing I've seen is that most people aren't aware of the sheer different ways that AI can be useful. One random example is, I use ChatGPT a lot for manipulating spreadsheets, uploading a file and then asking it to change something. And it's like having a junior analyst, on your team. And it's good enough at so many things, but it's also good at helping you be good enough and to learn things. And so a lot of times things break down in organizations between different stakeholders. So for example, I'm waiting on someone technical to do something. AI really does shrink that gap where instead of me passing something off to someone as a technical capability, I can be good enough with AI to do it myself. And so whether it's like a little bit of coding, a little bit of spreadsheet manipulation, a little bit of data analysis, the fact that you can upload files and do all these things now, most people aren't aware of all the different ways you can use it. So I'd say for training, the number one thing just personally I would advocate for is highlighting various use cases, because then once people see it, it'll stick with them. But I'd also ask companies to be responsive and hear about what people want to learn more of. But usually I don't think people even know how good it is at so many different tasks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's actually been like a nonstop theme with this show. I mean, every episode we've tried to surface use cases like that. And I'm always, being exposed to new ideas, new ways. Either I see somebody else doing it or it just occurs to me. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was trying to determine what the monthly downloads for this podcast were. And because I'm getting stats from 3 different places and none of them offer this monthly view. And I just wanted to see how I was progressing month over month. So I was downloading the daily stats and I was going to import them into a spreadsheet and calculate the monthly totals and then get an average from that. And halfway through that project, which probably would have taken me an hour, I realized, I can just throw the files into ChatGPT and ask it, right? And
happened a lot too.
Oh my gosh. And within seconds, not only did it have the answer, it gave you a cute graph. So I could see how the things were progressing month over month.
So sometimes we get this interesting data back and we have the data and the interpretation is a little open. But one potential reason, for example, why executives have been adopting this is that they're, instead of individual contributors, they're often used to collaboration and delegating things, et cetera. And this is like having an analyst across many different forms, from data science to coding to design, et cetera. So like, I'm not technical across any of these fields like design and engineering, but you can ask it for code. You can ask it for a quick design of something. And these are all prototypes. You really need experts to polish and finish the work. But if there's one thing I think AI is really good for, it's prototyping, and I'd say also scaffolding. So for example, executives are often doing strategy work, and I can't for the life of me sometimes remember certain things, but if you ask it for an outline, humans are better at filling in the outline. but AI is better at like remembering pieces so you don't forget them and leave them out. So I'd say those are two examples. But I do expect this gap to close just because I think it's going to continue transforming our work. But it's interesting seeing this gap, and I think training could help. So if you're a company listening to this or an executive, I'd really lean into that for your team.
And one of the things that the data showed that stood out to me was that there were different concerns across different levels. Executives tended to worry about client expectations, while entry-level marketers might have been focusing on ethics and copyright. How do you think teams can bridge this perspective gap in AI adoption?
I think both are really important. And so I think both sides can learn from the other in terms of their concerns. As you mentioned, it makes sense why people are concerned with these. So for example, executives being concerned about just, will this work meet client demands? Even though they're adopting it, they know that there's gaps in what it can do, that it's not perfect, that there are, hallucinations or problems. And so I think that awareness is driving that. So definitely the top concern for executives are, hey, 46% are asking, is this work going to be acceptable for my client? The other part is they do worry about, will this work, or will these tools diminish my teammates' innate creativity? And I think that's also really important to talk about, because if you're early to AI, it's very easy to let AI steer you into, I almost would call it like mid-level work. Like the default response will be fairly average. And so you need to know how to use it to make yourself better. And an AI-assisted person will be better than someone without AI. But I think executives are worried, will people lean on this for as a crutch, and just will I get, average or mid-level results back from, what you're asking these AI tools? So if execs are worried about, is the work acceptable at a quality level, and, will this diminish my teammates' creativity? On the other side, junior teammates and entry-level folks are thinking, well, okay, is the work going to be, good enough quality for my outputs? But they're more concerned on things like bias and copyright issues and infringement issues, which you'd think executives would be worried about. Like executives are usually the ones worrying about legal stuff like that. But this might be a little bit of a generation thing of, the entry-level folks are more familiar with the creator economy. I'd say they grew up with it more. And they're thinking about, where's this training data coming from? Or is it going to be biased? We're living in a really interesting media environment, to say the least. But I'd say, yeah, everyone's concerned about quality and accuracy. But the difference is, I'd say, is executives, I think they don't want this to diminish people's latent creativity. And the entry-level folks are just making sure, hey, are my outputs biased from, the writing I'm getting back, or do I have to worry about copyright issues? But it's really weird to see that the copyright stuff didn't appear as a top concern for executives.
Yeah, and that all makes a lot of sense. That reflects a guest lecture that I was just giving this past week for Baruch College in New York City. And I was talking to these young marketers who are about to enter the workforce about how they need to learn how to customize and personalize AI and give themselves an entire team of AI assistants as they go into needed jobs, but also need to be aware of not being too reliant on AI. Folks, we're talking with Corbett Drummey about the massive differences between how executives and staff are adopting AI. And I've got 7 more questions you aren't going to want to miss. But first, a quick word from our sponsor.
This episode of AI and Marketing Unpacked is brought to you by Magi, your gateway to making generative AI incredibly simple and accessible. Wondering how to seamlessly integrate AI into your marketing strategy without getting bogged down by complexities? That's exactly where Magi shines. It provides user-friendly AI solutions that empower marketers just like you to innovate and elevate your campaigns without needing a degree in data science. Imagine having the power to generate creative content, insightful marketing data analysis, or even personalized customer communications, all at the touch of a button. Magi isn't just about providing tools, it's about transforming your approach to marketing with AI that's tailor-made to be straightforward and effective. So, whether you're looking to boost your content creation process or want deeper insights into your marketing performance, Magi makes it all possible with a few clicks. No fuss, no hassle, just results. Ready to simplify your AI journey? Visit Magi today to learn how their solutions can revolutionize the way you engage with your audience. Don't just market smarter with Magi. Tap the link in the show notes.
So, Corbett, for the marketing leaders who are listening to us right now and they want to figure out how to resolve some of these differences and just adopt AI across the organization, what role do you see them playing in democratizing AI access and training in particular in their organizations?
I think there's 2 points here. Although I've talked a lot about painting it as something really good, which I think it's healthy to have an eye on the horizon. I think first off, executives could just make. I think it's important to make sure you keep your ears open to the feedback you're hearing from your entry level teammates and your individual contributors. So there's concerns that they'll be bringing about how this might impact their day to day work, and I think it's important to listen to and use that when communicating your own ideas on the importance of adopting these tools. But outside of listening to your teammates and their concerns, since they differ from, I think, what yours would be as a company executive, I do come back to the training part because, executives are learning mostly, like 2/3 mostly from the company. Half of them, more than half of them are learning from outside sources, but only a third are teaching themselves. And that's completely flips on the employee side. Most employees, when they talk about where they learn these, it's from their own use. And so again, I think most of the magic from using AI comes from seeing other people use it and how they use it in the workplace. And so that training that's specific to your workplace, I think will go really far compared to what you might pick up on your own just from the internet. And so one other note that we haven't talked about, which is a little bit of a interesting wrinkle to this, is that now in a post-pandemic world, there is less in-office work. And I think that one of the ways historically junior teammates have leveled up is they are in office and learning from people. And I think everyone loves a flexible work environment, but if you are completely remote, it's a lot less likely that you're going to pick up these tips and tricks from your team. And so I think that also might be a confounding factor in terms of one of the reasons why there's this gulf in learning and or appreciation of these tools. So I'd say if you're a junior teammate and you want to, pick up the pace in terms of your adoption in this, I think you can, like I said, advocate for company training, but also just try to be around teammates who are using it. And I think getting into an office environment can help. And just so you pick it up kind of by osmosis. And I've learned a lot of tips and tricks around the office for different creative tools that I would not have picked up by myself. So I think the workplace context of the tools is important in terms of how people use them for things that would be in your day to day. And just picking up by osmosis is another random point that's worth mentioning.
That is a great point to mention. In fact, it was something we talked about in a previous episode with Ashley Gross. And her kind of tip or recommendation for remote employees like myself. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I don't have an Agorapulse employee within 500 miles of me. So there is no option for me to go to any office. Our headquarters are in Paris. But what we do have is a vibrant Slack community. And her recommendation for every business was to have a Slack channel or someplace where people are conditioned to regularly go and share what they're doing with AI. Recently, like I should go and share the thing I did with the spreadsheet because I'm sure I've got coworkers who are also wrestling with spreadsheets now and then and would love to have that recommendation. And I would love to know how they're using AI and level each other up.
That is an amazing recommendation. We have a Slack channel for everything. I'm very surprised that I'm not in one for that. We used to have a productivity channel around the pandemic because there's so many tips and tricks when we started working remote briefly around the pandemic. But that's a really great one because there's so much you can do now. It feels like every week there's a new frontier model being released, et cetera. As Lightricks being a content company, we're building our own AI tools from, LTX Studio, which is an amazing AI video platform, to for Popular Pays, we made this really cool AI brand safety tool called Safe Collab. And we see cool uses in our Slack channel around our own tools and how you can use them. But yeah, I mean, there's all these periphery things you learn. There's an AI for everything. And that's, if you are remote, that's a really good recommendation, is to kind of condition the team to just be dropping in tips for that. And it really helps everyone move forward much faster.
Yeah, and by the way, we did an entire episode, you and I, Corbett, about the amazing things that you guys are doing with your tools and the AI-powered development. So I'll have a link to that in the show notes because, folks, if you're doing anything with video or want to do anything with video, they have some amazing, amazing tools that you can look into. I kind of hinted at that at the outset, and I needed to say more. But I also talked in the outset about that weekly usage statistic. And I want to get your take on that. 77% executives versus 53% entry level is really shocking to me. What specific AI tools or applications do you think that these executives are using, maybe that junior staff aren't?
It's a really good thing to talk about. First off, like you said, that discrepancy is really surprising. Again, I can't think of any other trend where executives are using things on a weekly basis where entry-level teammates aren't for something so strategic as this. But yeah, the usage, it again does differ. For example, in terms of the executives, it's things around like collaboration, everyone's using it for writing, both entry level and executives. That's the number one use case. So I'd say the classic ChatGPT. But I think there's a little bit of difference where I've seen a lot of people in leadership default to ChatGPT almost as like replacing Google. And so I think understanding that you can ask threads and follow up on it and keep context of a search is very different from how you Google things. And so I'd say, of course, writing is a top use case across the board, but execs are using it for things like design, collaboration, strategy, and a few other random ones like audience targeting. And so these are more like collaborative, multivariate uses, whereas on the entry level, it's like, writing, brainstorming, content creation, etc. But the weekly use is shocking. It's 77% for execs and only 53% for entry level. I'd say on a personal basis, the best things you can do is try just defaulting for a week to ChatGPT for search results. Now I mostly do that. Like 3/4 of my own searches are through ChatGPT and not Google. And that's a really good like entryway into it. It builds a habit, and then you'll find all these really cool ways you can branch off from that initial use case. Funny enough, I don't use it for writing really. I use it for scaffolding things, but I don't use it to write. But that is currently the top use case.
Yeah, that makes sense. I recall being on a company meeting a couple weeks ago, and in the course of the conversation, our CEO said, "Well, let me look that up in ChatGPT instead of a Google search." And it was a little jarring to me that he was doing that, and I realized, oh yeah, okay, more and more folks, that's what they're turning to as the default, because it's giving them, instead of a list of options, it's just giving them the answer. But one of the interesting things also that I picked up on in the research report from you and AMA was that it indicated that 27% of the executives want to be in the driver's seat. And while that might sound like a low percentage, compare that to just 5% of entry-level marketers. What does that tell us about the future of marketing careers?
Yeah, this is actually one of the more interesting points I really wanted to talk about. But yeah, going back to it again, there's that hesitancy gap. So a lot of this could be due to training. It could be like just the broad awareness of where AI is helpful and where it's going. But that stat is one of the most interesting ones around, 27% of executives being okay or wanting AI in the driver's seat with little human oversight, and only 5% for entry level. That's, of course, there's a lot of things here that make sense. For example, it might be entry level folks are worried about their job being disrupted if AI is primarily in the driver's seat. I would disagree, by the way. I think it's increasing everyone's productivity, but we don't see it taking jobs. It's more of, you should be worried about the teammate who's using AI taking your job versus just AI itself taking your job. But there have been a few places where, as I think execs see places where AI could be really helpful, even without much human oversight. One of the top use cases was audience targeting, for example. There are certain things like that where it's so complex that it's hard for humans to really input things in time enough to really move the needle better than AI can. And I'll give you one example. Like many people use Facebook ads. And for a while now, the most effective way of using it has been just kind of letting AI learn and serve things with, not the same human oversight you'd be used to specifying your own audience. So that's one where marketers are more used to, but more and more will see that. I also want to shout out our team built, I think, the first use case where I would strongly prefer only AI used like in the driver's seat versus anything. This is pretty wild, but when we release Safe Collab, I've seen clients have people spend 4 to 6 hours vetting a single creator, and we put that creator into our brand safety tool, and it catches things the humans never could. Like it can look back through years of audio, visual, text, etc., and highlight, an audio piece in a clip from 2 years ago or whatever. And that is a precision that humans can't achieve. And so I think that human oversight is necessary to kind of, approve, accept, or deny the results. But that's one where I don't want humans doing that work. It's both routine and they should be doing more strategic work, but also they're not good enough at it. Like this is for AI. And so I think we're seeing more and more of those cases, things like targeting, catching, brand safety things. Now that these models are multimodal and can view audio, visual, text, etc., there are growing cases of that. But I think, again, entry level might be worried about job displacement, where in fact, I think people should be more worried about not using these tools and not growing, both as a company and personally, than being, like a lot of people are scared of adopting tools, but instead you should be scared of not adopting them is on my real honest take about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mentioned a moment ago that I've been talking to students at Baruch College, I've talked to students at Otterbein College. I'm talking to a group of students at Emory in a couple of weeks. And what's interesting to me about each one of these instances is that I'm coming in as a guest lecturer to a general digital marketing course where they basically aren't talking about AI. It's not being taught. They're not being formally trained. So how can, marketers who are, coming into the workforce, or, they've been there just for a couple of years, these early career, early entry marketers, how can they close this AI gap, do you think, especially if they're not receiving formal training?
It's a really tough question. I mean, podcasts like this, I think that I'd go back to try to, if you're remote, at tools like you said around having a community you're in, whether it's your colleagues at work or a community where people are sharing these, so you can get more exposure to it. But see what works best for you, whether it's a great podcast on how marketers are using it, communities on Slack, et cetera, working with teammates, in proximity with them, so you can pick up these by default, the work habits. But it is a challenge. And then, advocating for more formal training. But yeah, it is the one classic answer too is you can use AI to learn AI. And actually, interestingly, I'd say the most frequent use case, from not the deepest I'll go, like I go pretty deep on certain tasks like data analysis, et cetera, and content creation with AI. But my most frequent use case is using AI to learn about other things. And that could be random things I'll take a picture of and say, what is this? Or, it could be quick facts I'm looking up. But I use it to learn about pretty serious topics too. I'm not super qualified to read a lot of papers, but, there's all these papers coming out on everything from AI development to scientific research, et cetera. And you can use AI to summarize things and to be an expert in your field. And so I think you need exposure for the day-to-day work tasks, but you can become pretty expert by using AI to kind of crawl dense information and help it be accessible to you.
That is such a great point. We talked lately about Notebook LM, being able to feed it all kinds of PDFs and documents and then have it generate a really fun and entertaining 5-minute podcast you listen to that will teach you or summarize, or you can even have questions with it back and forth. But another great, just a general use case, like you said, is if you're being suddenly asked to do something new in your role that you've never done before, maybe your team needs you to put on a webinar and you've never done a webinar, or you're going to a live event next month that you've never exhibited a live event, we'll bring AI on and have a conversation with it and allow it to tell you, here's the list of all the things you need to think about. Because if you've never done it before, you're not going to be able to fill in that list very well. Now you can figure it all out once you have that list, but AI can be a real asset there, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's when I say scaffolding, that's kind of what I mean around, like, say you're interviewing for a job for a marketing brand manager role, and you only had a narrow background before, and this is a more broad role. You can say, if I'm making a marketing plan for X, Y, and Z, what should I consider? It's not going to make you like the best tagline or the funniest, and you'll have more creative ideas in it, but it's really good at making sure that you're thinking of all the pieces along something, whether it's a document you're drafting, a plan you're crafting, et cetera. So that scaffolding use case is really powerful.
And one of the really interesting things for my last question for you, Corbett, this ongoing conversation that we've been having on this show and even outside the show is, how is AI going to affect my job, my colleagues' jobs, the makeup of my marketing department and my company, or the company overall? Did the research tell you anything about changes in how marketing teams might be structured, the roles that might be necessary over the next few years?
We didn't dive into that one specifically with the research in terms of asking marketers how their teams are changing, for example, but I've seen it day to day. We architected our marketing team. It's making everyone more efficient. What's crazy too is it's really hit the marketing landscape first compared to any other space. Like, AI will change everything about everyone's jobs, but there are certain industries that are more regulated, ranging from, things where you're in physical product production to medicine, et cetera. And content, it was kind of the earliest and wild west use cases of AI impacting our day-to-day jobs. The first tools were these LLMs and content creation tools that are really changing all of our day-to-day works. So I'd say we know that it's going to change everything about marketers' roles, and it won't stop. And we are also kind of the ground zero for that change. So it's tough. It's tough as a creator, as a marketer, as even someone building these tools, to constantly have to learn the next thing or, integrate the next library or model that's come out. But I guess it's better this than the other, which you don't want to be in a field that's totally static. But the pace is fast and will get faster. So the last thing I'd say on that part is, I really encourage everyone to use these tools for their own enrichment. Like, I don't think I ever would have been able to dedicate the time to be a software engineer, for example, with what I have today. But I have used these to make a very simple web app. And that's, I'm not a designer, but I've used LTX Studio to make a movie and of a story I've always wanted to create. So I think that this should enrich everyone. It's tough to learn everything, and it can feel exhausting at times to stay on top of things, but it can be really enriching, and it can help you branch out into things that you might never thought possible. So I am an optimist about this stuff. I think that it'll empower people, not replace them, and they can be used in great ways. So just stay optimistic about it. Keep an eye out for where it can help you. We all should be looking out for making sure we're using it in a like ethical and ways that are productive and helpful. But keep an eye out that there are a ton of ways where it can be used in that way. There are a ton of great use cases for it.
What a great way to wrap up. Thank you so much, Corbett. This has been so insightful. For folks who want to learn more about you or connect with you, where can they go?
So I would go to lightricks.com because we have a whole suite of amazing products. But we'll be posting about this survey. We have a dedicated site with some really cool visualizations and graphics. It's our survey with AMA, the American Marketing Association. But I would follow us on Twitter. We're posting cool stuff all the time, ranging from our new products, the survey results, etc. But if you have a moment, check out the site because it has the coolest visualizations, and you can also share this easily with your colleagues to kind of spur them into action about some of the stuff we talked about today.
It's terrific stuff. Like I said, we talked about it in a previous episode, so we'll have a link to that episode. Everything that Corbett mentioned today, including the report, we'll have linked in the show notes. Check it out. And by the way, don't forget, if this is your first foray into AI marketing and you're kind of feeling overwhelmed by things like LLMs and Claude versus Gemini, I've got an AI marketing primer for you. It's free. It's in the show notes. It'll help walk you through what all these terms and tactics mean and help you get started on your journey into AI today. That's all the time we've got for today, friends. Check us out in the next episode. Until then, welcome to the grid.
Thanks for joining us on AI and Marketing Unpacked. I hope today's episode has inspired you and given you actionable insights to integrate AI into your marketing strategies. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and consider leaving a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts and answer any questions you might have. Don't forget to join us next time as we continue to simplify AI and help you make a real impact in your marketing efforts. Until then, keep innovating and see just how far AI can take your marketing. Thank you for listening and have a fantastic day.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Henneke Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Henneke, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennekewatkins-porter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.